It's going to be a short talk about a topic that could certainly be endless, but tonight's a long meditation. So I'm going to talk for about 15 minutes and then we'll meditate for the rest. And the general idea is this concept of your highest self. Like, what is that? And I had a really great question from one of the students yesterday. Steven's been practicing Tai Chi with me for a long time. He's a great student. I know he practices. I assume that he meditates all the time. He said, Sifu, having a hard time with this challenge of the week. So the internal challenge of the week is once a day, ask yourself what your highest self would do, and then do that thing. And it seems simple enough. If you start digging into this idea of highest self and like you start wondering what that is, that's where it gets a little bit complicated. Once you know what the answer to the question of what would my highest self do right now, going from that to actually doing the thing that you know you should be doing, that's not complicated at all. It's just really difficult for most people. The space between what you know you should do and what you actually do can be a chasm the size of the Grand Canyon for most people. But if we can take that distance away and just do the thing that you know you're supposed to do, it would be amazing. It would be so powerful. But the first part of this, like knowing what or who my highest self is, and then like trying to decode what that version of me would do in this situation, that can be a little bit more complicated. Or it could also be very simple. So I'll give you the simple version of this is you meditate, you let go of your ego, you let go of thoughts, you try to get a break in that mental kind of chain of events and that causal chain of like, this happens to me and it makes me think this, and then I don't actually believe that you can get a real break in the causal chain, but let's just say for the sake of this idea, is if you can get a break, a pause in these thoughts, in this chain of thoughts, and then you can just create a clearing, this emptiness. You get to Mu Shin and you just experience no mind, and you can get there in meditation. Then when you're done with meditation, probably fairly soon after you're done, that thing that you are grappling with, this question of what should I do? Should I do this? Should I do that? Or should I do some other thing that I have no idea what it is? That thing will probably come to mind fairly quickly, and then you'll just ask yourself, what should I do in that kind of headspace? And you'll probably come up with something different from what you would normally get. The truth is, our ego usually runs the show. Our smallest self, the part of us that is really just selfish, self-centered, lazy, so concerned about how we look and all of that little stuff that just gets in the way. That part of us usually runs the show. And if we are able to let that go and just be our biggest self, our highest self, then we'll make incredible decisions. So meditation is probably the number one tool to getting there. But it's not the only way. Honestly, this question, I described it earlier today, is kind of like just a way of tricking yourself into doing the thing that is kind of difficult to do, but you kind of know you're supposed to do it, right? So like you're driving home after class and you have the chance as you're driving by the restaurants that you could stop at to get dinner. You've got Taco Bell and you've got, I don't know, a healthy restaurant. Now I eat at Taco Bell sometimes, but I try to get the healthy stuff at Taco Bell, which is not easy to do. But you've got this choice. You're driving by and it's just like, do I stop here or do I stop here? And your gut might say, oh, let's just stop at Taco Bell. It's going to be fast, it's going to taste delicious, and I might not have any digestive issues after it. But your highest self says like, I didn't get a lot of fiber today. I know I should eat some vegetables. I should probably stop at the place where I'm going to have to wait a little bit longer to get the food because it doesn't come out of a gun. I'm going to have to chew a little bit longer and digest those vegetables. If you ask yourself, what would my highest self do in this situation? What should I really do right now? And very often the answer is the thing that's a little bit more work, the thing that is a little bit harder, the thing that you know you should be doing. The only reason you're not doing it very often is because it's more work, because it's harder, because you have to kind of psych yourself up in order to do it. So very often it's not actually that, it doesn't require a lot of detective work to figure out what your highest self would do. Now, this trick works fairly well if we're talking about like a binary kind of situation. It's I do this or I do this. Or do I do this, yes or no? When you start getting into the realm of all of the possible actions that you can be taking, now it gets a little bit trickier. And just choosing between the thing that's difficult, but I know I kind of should do, or the thing that's not, might not be the answer. Right? So I described it earlier today. It's not like, my choice is going to Taco Bell, going to the vegan restaurant, or saving the whales. Like, well, that might be the thing that you do. You're like, forget all this. I'm going to go get on a boat and save the whales. That might be what your highest self would do. And to get in touch with that, again, meditation, lots of introspection, a lot of work kind of has to happen. So allow yourself to kind of be creative with it. Sometimes when you ask yourself this question, this is an opportunity to kind of think outside the box, get at something that you don't normally get at. So the question of what would my highest self do could also be, I'm pretending that I am the Buddha, or I'm pretending that I am Jesus, or I'm pretending that I am Mother Teresa, whatever kind of saint or, person who you kind of hold in high regard would do. You think, if I were XYZ person, I'll just use Jesus because that's a question that so many people ask themselves every day. What would Jesus do? What would Jesus do? So, what would Jesus do if Jesus were me in this situation? Well, Jesus didn't have, as I mentioned earlier in the week, Jesus didn't have traffic to deal with. So I don't know if Jesus would do what we think Jesus would do in every situation, but what would you do if you can imagine yourself having the qualities of that person? What would you do in this scenario? And it might be, I would do this versus this, or it might be a totally unforeseen possibility. So have fun with it. And, you might have to think a little bit more and, recognize like, well, way back in the day when the Buddha was around, they didn't have this, they didn't have that. It's like, would the Buddha have just spent a lot of time scrolling through Facebook or Instagram or TikTok or whatever it is now? Maybe, probably not. You can take a more modern version, like what would the Dalai Lama do? Well, the Dalai Lama has access to TikTok for sure. I kind of doubt that he spends hours a day on TikTok, but you might kind of arrive at a more useful way of attacking any kind of given scenario with that. So the challenge of the week is not only to ask yourself this question, what would my highest self do in this situation, but to also do it. And sometimes it'll be quick, but sometimes it will be something you have to kind of stew on a little bit. And that's okay. That's part of the challenge, is to get at, like, what is that version of me? And so when Stephen asked me, he asked, who decides who is the highest version of me? Like, who decides what that is? And I said, you do. There's nobody else who's going to decide what this is. And that's part of the difficulty, is there's nobody else who's going to come in and save the day and tell you what you should be doing. this is part of the problem with, I think, not the philosophy, but kind of the execution of a lot of, organized religion, is they try to tell you, like, literally, you should do this, thou shalt do this, thou shalt not do that. And unfortunately, life in the world is a little bit more gray than that. It's kind of difficult to get hard and fast rules that tell you exactly what to do in any given situation. So we have to kind of decide for ourselves most of the time. Now, there are obvious things, I think for some of the rules, it makes sense. Thou shalt not murder is like a good one. You can just go with that. But there are going to be situations where you just kind of have to take the spirit of the philosophy, and it's like, what do you believe? And when you are able to connect to that higher version of yourself through meditation, through just kind of selfless acts, it'll become something that is not so much of a mystery. And the answer of what should I do in this situation will kind of come more clearly, more and more often as you do this. So when you do your longer meditation, this is one great option for something. A shorter meditation, you might get to a moment or two of clarity. You might clear your mind. But when we meditate for longer and we get deeper and deeper, now we're starting to access a little bit of that, what is really beyond the ego. And when we're able to connect to that in meditation, then it can show up in real life. Now, there's a way to look at this in the flip side. This is really the point of the challenge of the week, is maybe you're having a hard time. Definitely you're having a hard time being your highest self on a regular basis. If it were easy, then it would not be the challenge of the week. And if you're already enlightened, great, you don't have to do this challenge of the week. But let's pretend you're a normal person and you're struggling with this. You're not often actually being your highest self. But you can at least conceive of what your highest self would do, or you can conceive of what the highest self, the best version of yourself that you can conceive of would do. So you at least know that there's a version of you that's better than the version of you that's going to Taco Bell. So what would that version do? And in that moment, when you know the best version of me right now goes to the vegan place, then you go there, right? And in the act, you are your highest self, right? You know that when you're feeling lazy and it's easier to just go home and sit on the couch and watch TV, but the highest version of you would show up and do class, show up to meditation. Then when you do that, you are being your highest self. And that's it, right? Sometimes, the most kind of colloquial way of putting this is you fake it till you make it. But I don't actually agree that you're faking it, because to do what is truly difficult in the moment is, you can't fake that. You have to actually do the thing. And so then when you're connected to your highest self. You are essentially your highest self. So in this meditation, what would your highest self do? Your highest self wouldn't move around. It wouldn't give up on the meditation when it gets hard. You wouldn't allow yourself to just sit there and replay your favorite movie in your head when you're supposed to be focusing on your breath. And your highest self wouldn't beat yourself up and get angry or overwhelmed by the meditation if it's not perfect. You let go of the thought and you come back to the present. So this is one of the best ways of connecting to your highest self, is just being in the present. This is it. This is the only time that it can exist, right? The concept of enlightenment, or the concept of an enlightened being like the Buddha, can exist, in the past and the present and the future, but the actual existence and the actual beingness of that can only happen here and now. So by just meditating and being in the present and allowing the thoughts to go and coming back to this moment here and now, you are being that. You are being your version of the Buddha. So no pressure. Sit comfortably. We'll go over a quick review of posture. So I like to sit kneeling in seiza, but you can sit cross-legged as well, as long as your knees are not above your hips. You can also turn that thing up on its side if you want to, if it's not super comfortable for you. And your hands are upturned at the hips. They can be together or they can be separate, but thou shalt not slouch. Don't let your hands slide down this way. Your shoulders are rolled back. Your chin is parallel to the ground. Oh, those eyes. Spine straight, eyes upturned to the point between your eyebrows. Relax. Watch the breath. Let go of all thoughts, worries, and cares. Be here now. So we'll do a short breathing exercise to kind of warm up to the meditation. Begin with all the breath out. Breathe into the nose for 5 seconds. Hold for 5 seconds. And breathe out for 5. Always in through the nose. Breathing from the belly. Hold at the top. Out through the nose or the mouth. In. Hold. Out. In. Hold. Out. Last one. In. Hold. Out. Finish with a double exhale. And then let the breath come in. Let the breath go out. So you're no longer manipulating the breath or trying to change it. You just let the breath move by itself. And connect your mind to the breath. You feel the breath entering and exiting through the nose, or you can feel the breath at the throat or in the belly. And you're not judging the breath. You're just feeling the actual physical sensation. You're also not judging your thoughts. If you have a thought that continues to pop up, just label it as thought. It's not good, it's not bad, it's just thought. You let it go, come back to the breath.